This is Tell Me Something Good About Retail with Bob Phibbs, the retail doctor.
Nothing pisses a customer off more than when you get corporate amnesia. I was like, what do you mean by that? She said, well, you go online and they learn all these things about you. And then you call support and they're like, hi, who are you? Again? And then you go in the store like, oh, hi, who are you? What do you want? She said, it's like that Groundhog Day thing.
Welcome to Tell Me Something Good About Retail with your host, Bob Phibbs, the champion for a more human connection in retail for over 30 years as a retail doctor. Bob is the authority on brick-and-mortar retail across the world, who works with some of the biggest luxury brands to independent retailers of all sizes.
Welcome back to Tell Me Something Good About Retail. I'm your host, Bob Phibbs, the Retail Doc. Every month, I talk with retailers and founders who are building something remarkable on the floor, behind the scenes, and at the heart of brick-and-mortar retail. This week, we're doing something a little different, bringing you a few standout conversations that have stuck with me, and judging by the messages I've received, stuck with you too. These guests represent very different corners of the industry, but they all share something in common: hustle, clarity, and the belief that retail is still a people business. You'll hear from a founder who took his side hustle public, a leader who measures loyalty in cakes, not coupons, an analyst who reminds us of why retail success still comes down to being brilliant on the basics, and more. So let's jump in. First up is Tom Sullivan, the founder of not one, but multiple national retail chains, including Lumber Liquidators and Cabinets to Go. When we picked up this part of the conversation, Tom was walking me through his earliest days, jumping bikes for quarters, spotting opportunity in weathered lumber, and out hustling the competition with a beat-up pickup truck and a fax machine. Here's Tom.
I don't know how old I was, but 12 or so, maybe younger. Built a couple ramps. So I used to like Evel Knievel, watching Evel Knievel. So I tried to be Evel Knievel on a bicycle. And I built some ramps and had a bicycle, and people paid 50 cents to watch, see if I could make it from one ramp to the other in my driveway.
And did you usually make it, or was it just take the money and run? How did it work?
Well, even if I didn't make it, I'd still got the money. So. No, but usually made it.
So I love the story of how you started Lumber Liquidators and, starting in retail when you had your own construction company up in Boston. Can you let our listeners know how that all worked out?
Yeah, so I had tried many things, from starting with probably before the bicycle jump, different things and different businesses, different ideas. But I had always done remodeling stuff. Like in high school, did painted houses for people, landscaping, shoveled snow when I was younger, and cut grass, all that. So sell Christmas cards door to door. So for some reason, I was always interested in that stuff. So between contracting, I'd come up with an idea, try a business, didn't work, but always learned something. And so I started storing lumber. I was building a lot of sun decks in the Boston area, and started storing lumber at a place called Kohano Trucking and Warehouse out in Stoughton, Mass. And they were trucking company, but they specialize in lumber. So they didn't own any of the lumber, but people like Georgia Pacific or whomever would ship product there. When they sold it, they would pay Kohano to ship a lift to, different lumber companies. And so in storing my lumber there, I started seeing some leftover stuff that wasn't bad. It just looked, the outside of it was weathered. The packaging was a little ratty, but the product itself was good. So found out who owned these different products and called them, see if they wanted to sell it at a discount. And then so made a few deals. And then on a Saturday, put a ad in the Boston Globe and other places and had a Saturday sale. And it was actually Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So the first time I did it, there's all these pickup trucks and housewives driving around Kohano Trucking, trying to find out where this lumber was. So they weren't too happy. And then we made a deal to move it out to a space closer to the street. But it was fun and it was a good business. So I kept trying to find deals and different type of building material deals. And Murray used to send out a fax to lumberyards and suppliers saying we buy excess material or whatever. And then also built up a list of people who needed different products for, builders and people who use wood in manufacturing. So I'd have another email list that would go out and say, we have these 10 items. And so during the week, I'd do that stuff. And then on the weekends, do the open to the public kind of thing. It was just an outdoor shed, so it was kind of always open.
Yeah. And I think that original first store is still there and looks pretty much like a shed, isn't it?
Well, that's not that. This was literally in the back of a trucking company in a warehouse under just a cantilever roof. So the first store is first Lumber Liquidators store. That was a year or two later, and that was extremely fancy when it started. And that, even though that didn't have running water or bathroom. So,
well, I love the way you just found the opportunity. And, when you were starting out, I think you told me that you had different phone numbers, wasn't it? That people would call, and that's how you knew where to locate your stores, by the amount of interest.
Oh, yeah. So getting to Lumber Liquidators from Kohano, there was a place in there that sold hardwood flooring, and they had a deal on flooring. So I bought that, and it was a much better business. It was, instead of having people sift through 200 2x4s to take 10 2x4s, people would come and buy 500 1,000 square feet of flooring. And so that's how I started Lumber Liquidators. Then they opened the first store in West Roxbury, Store 1. It was an old metal building behind a retail shop on Route 1 in West Roxbury, wedged between the Charles River and this other retail building. And yeah, so we started that. It started off a little slower, but it was in middle of January, or January 5th in 96.
Next, you'll meet Tammy Ketterman from Veterans Jewelers in Leesburg, Virginia. This wasn't just another conversation about foot traffic or digital strategy. Tammy reminded me that retail at its best is emotional: scent, memory, anticipation, and care. In her case, that's rum cake, and lots of it. We're joining Tammy just after she explains how a family-owned jewelry store became something closer to a local institution. Here's Tammy.
When my husband walks into my kitchen in August and I've started baking rum cakes for the Christmas season, he'll say, "Is it Christmas?" And he hadn't seen a cake or anything, but he can tell by the smell. And to him, rum cake smell reminds him of Christmas. So scent is a trigger. To this day, I can't drink mint iced tea without thinking of riding horses when I was a kid, where mint grew wild.
That's so true.
So that is
true.
a big trigger. So in our store, we have a particular scent that's an Asian mint that people say, "Oh my gosh, I thought about you the other day," and found out it was because the woman next to me was wearing a perfume that's like that scent you have in the store. So that's one of the triggers. The whole Hugh Jackman thing, that could be a trigger.
Right.
My husband missed a dentist appointment last week. So in order to make it up to the dentist and the hygienist, he took a rum cake to the dentist. And he's standing at the reception window, and one of the women said, "Oh my gosh, this looks so good. What kind of cake is it?" And he said, "It's rum cake." And a woman sitting in the waiting room said, "Oh my gosh, Ketterman's has the best rum cake." And the girl said, "Oh, that is a Ketterman's rum cake." And she said, "Oh my gosh, that's amazing." So
well, we have to go back to the rum cakes now. We have to get into it. So how did you come up with rum cakes? What is the significance of what they do with your business, and ultimately, how does that figure into your marketing? So all of those would be great to answer.
Okay. My aunt was putting on a shower for one of my sister when she was having a baby, and had me come over and help bake a rum cake. She used an old Methodist church recipe book. It was a cake that was so good that I would take it home and I would make it for our Christmas and Thanksgiving celebrations. And many people don't realize this, but in the state of Virginia, you cannot serve alcohol while your cash register is open. So as
I didn't know
on,
that. Okay.
My girls are lamenting the fact that we can't have tastings or whatever. I said, well, I can serve rum cake. That's got, alcohol in it, but it doesn't count. So we served it at an event and it got rave reviews. And so, I had been giving rum cakes to local vets and dentists for years. So we started putting out rum cake the week of Thanksgiving and and we would keep rum cake out for the Christmas season. And the first year I did it, I don't even know how many I made because I didn't count. But we've been asked so much lately, how many cakes did you bake this past?
Right.
This past holiday season, we served 326 rum cakes over that season.
Wow.
So, and that doesn't include the ones that we give IP customers. And we have some lovely remembrances of customers and their experience with the rum cake.
Well, I want to go back to that with your better customers. So they also get a rum cake. Is it something if they come in, you give it to them? How do you deliver it? How do they get it? How do you know who they are? Any of that kind of stuff.
Well, we identify customers who have been with us for a long time, who have recently become a customer, and we know repeating. So, we feel a great relationship with them, and we call them our friends and family, which when we came up with the term, it didn't seem like it was anywhere. Now it's everywhere.
It's everyone's excuse to have a discount. That's not the way you use it. Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Right, exactly. These truly are people that we want to go out, shake their hand, give them a hug, say thank you so much for being our customer. So we send out cards just before Thanksgiving, thanking them for the relationship that we have and inviting them to come in, that we have a special gift for them and to come in, bring their family if they want to. And so it has become a tradition for many of our customers to come in. So a few years back, I decided, well, this year I'm going to put a little individual rum cake in each one of these friends and family gifts. Well, that once you start something like that, you can't stop it.
Careful what you wish for. Brilliant.
I know. So we usually have about 200 friends and family who come in to get it. And we give away that many little individual size rum cakes with that gift.
Now let's shift into the world of customer experience with Michael Hinshaw. He's the president of M Corp CX and author of Smart Customers, Stupid Companies. Michael breaks down why most CX strategies fail, why more data doesn't mean better decisions, and how companies like Patagonia and SFO Airport are doing things differently. We join him just as he's explaining how transparency and not tech builds trust, and how retailers can rethink the role of metrics like Net Promoter Score, NPS.
My background's in design, and I built and sold a brand strategy firm in the late 1990s and was approached by a private equity group to start a company in the internet space, something they knew little about, that I knew little about, but we figured it'd be interesting to do. And they ended up writing me a fairly large check to go into the grain trading business in Canada. So again, right, art guy, lived in San Francisco, and I was like, how do I do this? And so I gathered a team and we went into that market, opened an office in Calgary, kind of the heart of the wheat belt, so to speak. And we talked to everyone. We talked to farmers, we talked to brokers, we talked to traders, we talked to the input providers, so the fertilizer, seeds, things like that. We talked to truckers, we talked to buyers. Long story short, we built out what we called relationship lifecycle maps and charted on the map what each of the players in that ecosystem was doing, what their pain points were, what worked, what didn't, and essentially identified a number of different technology solutions that we could bring to bear leveraging the internet to reduce friction, increase value, and to drive greater connections across that ecosystem as a new player. So in a relatively short period of time, about a 3-year period of time, we grew to be the largest independent grain trader in Canada. We had about 130,000 acres of wheat under management. And I took a year off, after which my wife had said, the kids are young, you've missed all this stuff because you've been traveling all over North America doing this grain trading thing. you need to stick around for the next little bit, or I might not. So I started MCorp CX 20 years ago, and I used the principles that I essentially created to identify interrelationships in ecosystems to found what was one of the early stage customer experience consulting firms. And I think we're one of the last independent firms still around, relatively small, 35 people, all very senior, all very experienced, and all with a significant passion for making customer experiences and employee experiences better. So
nice.
There you have it in a nutshell. 20,000 feet, 500 miles an hour.
Although that grain story was like, wow, grain, wait a minute. I think we're talking about retail. So what are the most common, I know what I think are the most common challenges retailers are facing right now, particularly in customer service. Everybody's pissed off in North America, and we're stressed out over a geriatric presidential campaign, and inflation is high, and everyone's scared. So we walk into a store, but what are the common challenges that retailers face in actually improving or changing that experience to something to the better?
Yeah, well, I have to say the most common issue that the retailers we work with face is the reality that retail is no longer just a physical store, right? There's human interactions that occur in the store. There's human interactions that occur online, on the phone. There's human interactions that occur in an entirely digital environment. There's digital interactions that occur without people or stores at all. And you got to figure out as a retailer, how do you blend all this stuff together? Because lots of times purchase journeys will start online and they might finish on the phone and or in store. And one thing, I was talking to a client yesterday, and she said something that really I hadn't heard before, but really struck a chord with me. She said, nothing pisses a customer off more than when you get corporate amnesia. I was like, what do you mean by that? She said, well, you go online and they learn all these things about you, and then you call support and they're like, hi, who are you again? And then you go in the store like, oh, hi, who are you? What do you want? She said, it's like that Groundhog Day thing where the company keeps forgetting who you are and you got to re-educate them every time. And so what we see is probably the biggest challenge is being able to optimize, link, and provide continuity across those various channels.
Next, I've got Neil Saunders, Managing Director of Global Data Retail and one of the smartest analysts in the game. We were talking about what makes great retail brands stand out. Not trends, but culture. Not gimmicks, but execution. When we joined the conversation, Neil's breaking down why chasing shiny objects won't save you, and why, in his words, differentiation is everything. Let's hear from Neil.
It is about being brilliant on the basics, and which also brings me, with free-flowing conversation we're having today with the role of VCs and so many retailers going out. Was it really that Toys R Us was so bad off, or was it because they were ladled with debt? Is it because JCPenney is so bad off or ladled with debt? I tend to think that once you go to the VC route, you probably are already dead. You didn't figure out your customer, and you figured, well, we'll just get some money in, or maybe they took you over in a hostile takeover, but you probably don't have the steering room to make a difference. Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would. I'd completely agree with that. I think VCs, as you say, sometimes they have a role. They take on businesses that otherwise wouldn't survive. But I think there is a real point to be made that where a VC treats a business as an ATM machine just to get money out of and ladens it up with debt, that retailer has very little chance of survival. And you see these highly leveraged, very debt-ridden traders like Toys R Us, or even J. Crew now, which has a colossal amount. How they've got that much debt it's completely it's not baffling. We know how it's been done, but it is an enormous, it's an
Neiman Marcus.
Neiman Marcus.
Tell me, how do we get there?
Exactly. These numbers are staggering.
Get just $1 million in debt? Could I do that? What the hell? And I'll still be in business, and I'll tell everything's fine, but I want to be like $5 million in debt.
Yeah, it's if you use it, I mean, if you take on debt and you're using it to invest and to grow the business, I think that's fine. But when you're just taking basically money out, I think you leave a retailer with no room for maneuver at all. And I always, I mean, going back to my first job at John Lewis. John Lewis is a partnership, so basically it's a workers' cooperative. It's very commercially focused. It says profit is part of the objective. But one of the things that I always take away from that is that John Lewis would rather make a little bit less money by investing and doing things properly and for the longer term than take the short-term gain of increasing profitability, whether it be by taking on lots of debt to give out in bonuses, or whether it be by cutting something here or there. And I think that that's an absolutely key focus for retailers today. They have to be long-term focused. You cannot be about the short-term gains, and it's a real problem for some.
Yes,
and if you look at Amazon. I mean, Amazon is very long-term focused. I mean, Amazon is on the next 20 years down the line, and it's investing, and it doesn't mind not making so much of a profit, and it shows in the results.
But they also haven't figured out brick and mortar, so
no, they haven't.
Kind of interesting. I was reading how they've actually lost. Whole Foods is losing market share in many markets, and even though they theoretically lowered the price, it's not special. To your point, how are you differentiating? Now you're part of Amazon, and now they're changing the private level to show Amazon as well. And what does that feel like then when you're shopping with them? How do you plan, and where do they go either way with the October Halloween deadline? Maybe not movable, who knows?
Well, I think this you put your finger on it with the word that you mentioned. It's uncertainty. I think no one really still knows exactly what's going to happen. We have a bit more certainty, sure. I think it makes it very difficult for retailers and others to prepare, because you don't want to make massive investments for something that's perhaps not going to come off. And of course, the other problem is that, with the potential disruption to supply chains, it comes at the worst possible time because everyone's gearing up for the holidays. So, from the retailer's point of view, it really is very, very challenging to plan. From the consumer's point of view, I think that the uncertainty is what makes people hesitant about spending. And that, of course, is not great in the run-up to the holidays. So in some ways, we need to have a very firm conclusion on it one way or the other, so that retailers basically can just get on with the business of retailing rather than being distracted by everything else that's going on around them.
And finally, Paul LaPont, owner of Quality Sewing and Vacuum. Paul reflects on 35 years in his business, the mindset of selling passion products like sewing machines, and how finding a way to say yes and creating a loyal customer base is what it takes. He contrasts high-performing staff with mediocre ones and shares how consistency, fun, and the personal touch drive success. Here's Paul.
I was going to school at the University of Washington, and my father actually worked for the Singer Company at that time, and I needed a part-time job, and so he hooked me up with the local district manager. And I began, being a delivery driver part-time from the Singer store that was near the university. It was University Village store, which was near the University of Washington. And I gradually got into, at that time, they formed a service center in that store, and they began servicing all the machines from all the Seattle area stores at that place. And I started to learn how to fix sewing machines. So when I was ready to graduate from the UW, I thought I was going to be an English professor, and the local district manager offered me the job of managing the service center. So all of a sudden I was managing. I was the youngest guy there managing, and I really didn't know really that much about service, but I took on the responsibility. I became a service manager. Fast forward a few years, and my father moved back. He was in another city, and he moved back to the Seattle area, opened a small sewing machine store. And my wife at that time, we had just had our second child, and so she was looking for a part-time job, and he was 62, and he wanted to have only work 3 days a week. So they formed this little, they basically ran the store, each of them working 3 days a week. And that lasted only about 6 months when he passed away suddenly. And we had to face a decision: do we keep the store open or do we not? And we made the decision to keep the store open. I stayed at Singer another 6 months. We hired an employee, and it took about 6 months to build up the business enough where I could replace my salary and cover the medical costs for my family. And that's when I left Singer and went to work full time. And to this day, I thank the Singer Company for not paying very well, because I never would have probably gotten to business for myself had that not happened.
And how many stores do you have now?
We have 13 stores at this. Well, we have 12. We're opening the 13th.
And how many employees is that?
We have about 150 employees.
Now, you were telling me earlier that when people ask you, so, what do you do? And you say, oh, I'm a sewing retailer. Is that it? And they're like, oh, does anybody even sew anymore? And what do you tell them?
Well, I tell them that it's kind of like what we do is kind of like sell Harley Davidsons, because what we're selling is a product that middle-aged people want, which is the high-end sewing machines and the high-end embroidery machines. It's not about need. It's the same way that a middle-aged gentleman will go out and buy himself a Harley because he's always wanted one. He doesn't buy it to drive to work. He doesn't buy it to save money. He goes out and spends 20 grand plus so he can ride it once a week to go out to the coffee shop and have coffee with some friends. And oftentimes, many of our customers will buy the top-of-the-line sewing machine. They may not use it that much, but they've always wanted one. Some of the enthusiasts who use it a lot, but at the end of the day, we're in the hobby business. We're selling things that people don't need. It's just like people don't need golf clubs unless you want to golf, and that's the same kind of idea. So we're selling that type of equipment. So our challenge is to have people who are dialed into that, who are enthusiastic, and can inspire hobbyists, or people who want to be hobbyists, to look at the latest and greatest.
I think that's great. One of the things that really stands out for me is your whole idea of our goal is to say yes.
Yeah, we call it finding a way to say yes.
And there's only two people that can say no in your company.
Exactly, myself and my daughter, who's my business partner.
And that's it.
That's it.
So how did that evolve, and what does that mean to you? Why is that so important? Because you've said it like numbers of times when we've been talking to your employees.
Well, it evolved because over the years, I've been doing this 35 years, and the more employees you have, the more chance you have to get complaints. And usually when you get a customer complaint, it's because somebody said no to them. And usually there was no reason they had to say no. There's a lot of different ways to say no, but they'll say, no, we can't do that. Most of the time, if you go back and talk to the customer, there was a way to say yes. The reason we don't say the customer's always right, and we don't say that you say yes to everything, is because you can't do that. I have a cartoon that shows a guy behind the counter and a lady holding a sewing machine there, and he's saying, refund your money, give you a new product, and have the service manager shot. How would that be okay? And it's kind of a joke on that. But the one thing I've learned is that people's requests are usually very reasonable. And it's and the reason we call it finding a way to say yes is because you can't always say yes to exactly what they want, and sometimes they don't even know what the correct solution to their problem is. But
it comes from they not feeling you heard them. Isn't that where it comes from?
That's right. Usually I found that people will be upset if they felt like they've been blown off, or if you haven't taken them seriously. They come in with a request or a complaint, and you take them seriously, and you let them know first off that you want to help them, that you're on their side, and that you're going to be their advocate, and you're going to call, and if you're the employee, you're going to call the owner, or you're going to call the manager. It's okay if you don't know what to do, but it's not okay to say no. You want to be on the side of the customer. And the cool thing is, many, many times, complaints turn into more business. It's very common. If someone comes in and they're mad, and when they realize you're going to take care of them, and you take care of them, you give them good service, they will buy something else on that very visit. And some of our best customers are people that I can remember coming in very upset about something. And since that time, they have spent literally tens of thousands of dollars because we took care of them. Yeah. And we didn't see the short side. A lot of times when I talk to other retailers, they say, well, I'm not gonna give you, that was your mistake. I'm not gonna give you your money back. Or, we service sewing machines. There are various parts, and sometimes we hand the machine back to the lady and there's a part missing. That is a part that comes in and out. It's called a bobbin case. And she says, no, I'm sure I brought it in. And I've heard people argue, well, no, we wrote right down, it wasn't here when you brought it in, and they're $35. Now, what we do as a policy, if the customer says she brought it in, you say, boy, I'm really sorry if we lost it. Here's a new bobbin case, no charge. Now, if you get home and you happen to find that you find it there, let us know and you bring the new one back. And people love that. And it's amazing how many times people will come back in a week later and say, I did find the bobbin case. But the point is, we didn't say no to them. No, you're wrong.
Well, that's it for this special episode of Tell Me Something Good About Retail. From startup grip to sensory selling, from handwritten loyalty to clean data and clear brand identity, There's no shortage of good in this business if you know where to look. And hey, if you're walking back into your store tomorrow wondering what to do with all this insight, here are 3 things you could do right now. 1. Reconnect with one loyal customer personally. Don't send another promo, just send a note. Make a call, drop a small thank you in their bag. Loyalty is a two-way street, and it starts with you. 2. Audit your brand clarity. Are you everything to everyone or something specific to someone? Get honest. Could a stranger walk into your store or onto your site and know what you stand for in under 10 seconds? And finally, train your team to think like owners, not order takers. Whether it's replacing a jacket with empathy like Patagonia or just noticing when someone picks something up, great experiences are built by people who care and who are equipped to act on that care. Just get them to say yes. If you've got something good from today's show, and I hope you did, share it with someone who needs it, maybe a manager, an owner, or just someone who forgot why retail still matters. Till next time, I'm Bob Phibbs, and you've just heard Something Good About Retail.
You've been listening to Tell Me Something Good About Retail with Bob Phibbs, the Retail Doctor. As a listener, you can receive free information and guides when you visit retaildoc.com and sign up for our exclusive weekly newsletter. Thanks for being with us. Remember to subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you like to get your podcasts. To virtually bring Bob to all of your crew and associates, check out www.salesrx.com.